Senegal's debt dilemma, a microcosm of Africa's financial struggles. Senegal, poised to become a major player in oil and gas, recently found itself grappling with a fiscal challenge. The country's $1.8 billion IMF aid program, secured in 2023, is currently stalled due to discrepancies between the government's reported debt and deficit figures versus actual data. This revelation raises questions about the IMF and Senegal's fiscal transparency and sustainability and reopens the broader debate on the efficacy of foreign financial aid from established lenders like the IMF and new players such as China. Kilimanjaro News Network cast a critical look on the debt architecture and key players on the African continent. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to Kilimanjaro News Network. Click the bell icon to be notified for more interesting and in-depth investigations and analysis of events happening throughout the continent and the diaspora. Since African nations gained independence, the IMF and World Bank have been key financial backers. Through structural adjustment programs, they aim to stabilize economies and promote growth. While these institutions are believed to have funded significant infrastructure, healthcare, and education projects, their conditions often come with substantial social and economic costs, leading to concerns about their influence on local politics and social welfare. Positive outcomes from IMF and World Bank loans in Africa. Projects like Egypt's Aswan High Dam boosted agriculture and power generation. Support for healthcare systems and schools, contributing to workforce development. Financial aid during economic crises, helping to stabilize currencies and curb inflation. However, criticisms persist regarding the social costs of IMF conditions, which are often linked to economic hardship, inequality, and support for pro-Western dictators like Cameroon's Paul Biya, who has held power for over 40 years. Case studies of debt clearance success. Although examples are rare, Botswana and Mauritius are often cited as success stories, having effectively leveraged IMF and World Bank support to drive economic growth. China's rise and the debt trap debate. China's influence in Africa, primarily through the Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, has drawn mixed responses. Western critics warn of a debt trap strategy, alleging that China's loans are designed to push African nations into debt, enabling China to acquire strategic assets. The experience of Sri Lanka's Hambantota port, a Chinese-funded project leased back to China for 99 years after debt repayment struggles, fuels this concern. However, there's little concrete evidence that China intentionally engages in such practices. Visible benefits of Chinese investment in Africa. Infrastructure. Major projects like Kenya's Mombasa-Nairobi standard gauge railway have lowered transport costs and enhanced trade. Industrialization. Support for manufacturing and industrial parks, fostering job growth and economic diversification. Capacity building. Investments in vocational training and technology transfer, contributing to skills development. Technology transfer is particularly popular among Africans as the West have often been criticized of deliberately exploiting, keeping Africa backward and only use it to furnish raw materials for its industries. While proponents argue that IMF and World Bank projects improve infrastructure, healthcare, and education, many citizens question whether these projects genuinely address everyday needs of Africans, citing social unrest from austerity measures. Conversely, Chinese-funded projects have often had a more visible impact, improved road and rail networks, creating local jobs and boosting local economies, though concerns over environmental harm and potential loss of sovereignty remain. Charting a sustainable path forward. African nations face the critical task of balancing the advantages and risks of these competing financial sources. By diversifying funding, negotiating favorable terms, and aligning projects with long-term development goals, they can better control their economic destinies. Through transparency and accountability, countries like Senegal can learn from their experiences and steer toward a future less burdened by debt traps and more aligned with sustainable growth. Kilimanjaro News Network would like to hear from you directly. Can African nations maintain fiscal transparency and sovereignty while relying on external financing from powerful lenders? How can countries ensure that foreign aid aligns with their own priorities rather than donor interests? Are IMF and World Bank loans fostering long-term development, or do they risk creating dependency by imposing harsh conditions? Could alternative funding sources, like China's investments, offer a viable path to sustainable growth? How do the social costs of foreign aid, such as austerity measures and potential displacement, weigh against its economic benefits? Are these sacrifices justified, or do they risk undermining the very growth and stability they aim to create? Is the fear of a debt trap with China based on genuine risk, or is it a narrative shaped by Western interests? How can African nations safeguard themselves from debt distress while still capitalizing on essential infrastructure investments? Send us your messages. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to Kilimanjaro News Network, the authentic voice of Africa. Scan our QR code and visit our website for more news coverage and unique analysis. Kilimanjaro News Network broadcasts in Swahili, Arabic, English, and French.